So you were involved in legislative initiatives right from the start. I believe in the Senate in your very first term.
Well, yeah, I was much more. I was sort of a non-traditional Democrat, very interested in international finance. By coincidence, I got energy. I knew nothing about energy, and then coincidence largely, but the oil embargo hit, and there I am sitting with responsibility for oil and become part of a massive effort to develop alternative sources of energy, fuel efficiency standards, and the like. And then I became chairman. Then I gave up that chairmanship because I led the reorganization of the Senate to try to upgrade all of our jurisdictions. We didn't have an energy committee, for example, and came out of that with a new subcommittee on science, technology, and space. And there we worked on industrial innovation, on competing with the Japanese who were invading. Mm-hmm. And the Stevenson-Wilder Technology Act followed. It's misnamed companion, the Bayh-Dole Act, which made cooperative research possible and public and proprietary interests in publicly funded research, et cetera, which led to the information technology explosion, years later. It was these were very significant reforms. Finally, more or less by coincidence, because who else would want it? Maybe I was junior, but on the banking committee, I became chairman of the subcommittee on international finance. And it was a fascinating experience. In '71, Nixon suspended convertibility of the dollar into gold. And all of a sudden, the world was linked to the dollar, but the dollar was linked to, nothing. And since those days, I've been, studying, mostly in East Asia, monetary policy and how to create monetary institutions for a, global economy, which nowadays doesn't have a valid reserve currency. This is very, very serious stuff. So I got partly lucky, but partly it was because of interest in these non-traditional liberal democratic subjects. Kennedy, for example, Ted went to school with me. He was much more traditional. He was interested in education and healthcare. But I got these other issues, which all by luck or otherwise suddenly were forefront, and made it a very interesting career. But towards the end of the '70s, I could see it coming to an end, with Reagan approaching, the ideologues approaching, and saw no chance of Carter, who was kind of a weak president, getting elected. So I decided to take a breather and maybe do what I'd always most wanted to do, which is to run for governor.
Well, let's talk a little more about the Senate years. Your reelection was at '74. Was that when because you were serving a partial term? And remind me what your opposition was at that time. I think it's
he's a wonderful guy. Served in the legislature with me, and his name slips my mind. That's embarrassing.
But you didn't have any Democratic opposition in
the
primary, nothing.
No. This was a first-rate, well-qualified partner in one of the big law firms. We'd served together. And a commentary, I beat him 2-1. He was overqualified. 5 days before the election, the League of Women Voters hosted a debate, and nobody came. No press, no TV came. We were discussing issues.
Was it George Burdett?
George Burdett.
George Burdett.
George Burdett, super, really qualified person, made a fine senator. It's embarrassing.
Involved in the Illinois Con in his day.
Yeah, he was a first-rate public servant, good, good man. Well, I'm trying to remember where we were,
but now 1976, there was talk then. What was there not of your running for vice president or maybe even president?
Yeah. Well, Mayor Daley, I got another call, asked me to run for president in '76, and I thought about it and decided I wasn't. Didn't feel ready. So he asked me to run for, as a favorite son. And I agreed to do that. And there was, no question really who controlled. In the primary, I won a number of delegates, but he had more control over them than I did. And he would tell Jimmy Carter to, see me. We saw a lot of Jimmy Carter, was courting my delegates. I was a little torn because Bobby Kennedy was running, and he's my old friend, but Teddy did not run a very good campaign. And Mayor Daley called me one day and said, hey, I think the time has come. We ought to swing our delegates to Carter. And we did, and that, I believe, cinched the nomination for Carter. But I had a close relationship with some of the members of his administration, Jim Schlesinger, who became the first Secretary of the Department of Defense, for example. But the Carter White House was really kind of weak. He brought in local people, friends of his, and they really weren't quite ready for for the office. I know what I'm missing. I didn't run for president, but I was on the short list for vice president. And these associates from Georgia of President Carter, then Governor Carter, came by and interviewed at length. I gave them access to all my hospital records and so on. And Nancy and I met with Rosalind and Jimmy Carter several times, and right up to the convention. We had a press conference at the convention with him. But the morning of the nominating for vice president, I got a call from him saying he was selecting somebody else, which was my seatmate, Walter Mondale, and a good choice, a really good man. And I had mixed feelings. I was in some ways relieved not to have been nominated. But we then went on to work, as I don't want to repeat, but work very closely with Schlesinger and others on energy and space policy. I had the responsibility for developing the space shuttle, among other things. And it was and the Republicans were very cooperative. But towards the end, I don't know, with Ronald Reagan approaching things, of course there was the Iran hostage incident, which weakened Carter terribly. He lost his Secretary of State, Cy Vance, who was first rate. Cy Vance warned against that operation, and his advice was disregarded. And so he quietly, faded away.
This was the attempted rescue.
Yeah. He knew better than to, take the military at face value. He'd been an Army secretary and just felt that if he didn't have the president's confidence, perhaps it was time to move on. He made no issue of it. And then my friend Ed Muskie, a great man, a seatmate, senator from Maine, he saw the Senate changing too. And he, unlike me, found a graceful way to leave the Senate. He left the Senate to fill the vacancy at State. He became Secretary of State for only a few months. But instead of just leaving the Senate as I did, he did it more gracefully. He talked to me at one point about becoming ambassador to Japan, but ambassadorship is something my father taught me to never seek. You're always taking orders from others, and you don't always agree with them. So we saw it changing. I was put in charge of a special committee to organize Democratic policy for the election as the Republicans began one by one, just in unison, voting for tax decreases. They changed with Reagan. It was a familiar old social Darwinian trickle-down economics. It reappears from time to time under different labels. You just cut taxes and increase spending and balance the budget. Well, it doesn't work. But it may be popular politically. In any event, we found ourselves voting over and over and over again against tax cuts. So I suggested to the caucus that that was not politically prudent. Maybe we better put together our own alternative program. And Lloyd Bentsen and I took responsibility for that, but we got very little press attention. So I left the Senate and began thinking about governor again.
And now, under the Illinois Constitution, the gubernatorial elections were now in the off election year, so 1982 was coming up very quickly. And you ran for governor.
Well, I did one other thing when I was in the Senate. I can't remember if we mentioned this, but I traveled a great deal. I found the Senate just wonderful as a way to continue travels that I had done, starting with my father. It's been more than 80 countries over the years since we first lived in London in 1915, but did I mention 1965 and our trip to Israel?
No.
Well, 1967, Nancy and I, as do upcoming politicians, we went to Israel, but we took a detour. We went to the West Bank and circumvented the Sea of Galilee, going through the Golan Heights of Syria, and visited Palestinian refugee camps. And we saw and heard the evidence of ethnic cleansing. And Bill Malden was there, and Seymour Simon, others. And we went to Nablus at one point and found not a human being in that whole city, except one Arab who was too scared or paralyzed. He wouldn't say a word.